The smell of roasted turkey and sage stuffing should have been comforting. It wasn't. I sat at that long mahogany dining table, the one I'd secretly paid to refinish 2 years ago, watching my mother-in-law Margaret serve herself another generous helping of mashed potatoes. The Victorian windows behind her were frosted with November cold, the kind that makes everything look pristine and beautiful from the outside. But inside this house, the temperature had nothing to do with the weather. My name is Elena. And on that Thanksgiving afternoon in 2023, I learned something crucial about family. Sometimes the people who share your blood are strangers, and sometimes the strangers you marry into remind you exactly how much of an outsider you really are. "Emma, sweetheart, pass Grandma the gravy," I said softly to my 7-year-old daughter. She reached across the table with her small hands, accidentally tipping the cranberry sauce. The deep red liquid spread across the antique lace tablecloth, the one I'd had professionally cleaned 3 times on my dime, like blood seeping from a wound. Margaret's fork froze mid-air, her eyes, cold, calculating, the same ice-blue eyes my husband Tom inherited, narrowed at me. Not at Emma, at me. "Really, Elena?" Her voice dripped with that particular venom she'd perfected over 8 years of making me feel small. "Can't you control your children? This tablecloth is a family heirloom. Oh, but I suppose you wouldn't understand that, would you?" My son Jack, barely 5, looked up from his turkey with wide, confused eyes. "Mommy?" I felt my husband Tom stiffen beside me, his hand reaching under the table to squeeze mine. A warning, a plea. The same silent message he'd been sending for years. Don't make waves. They don't mean it. Just let it go. But then Margaret smiled. That particular smile, the one that made her look like she was sucking on a lemon while pretending it was honey. She leaned forward, her diamond necklace, a gift from Harold's alleged inheritance that never quite materialized, catching the light from the chandelier I'd had rewired last spring. "Let's be honest here, dear." She dabbed her lips with her napkin, letting the words hang in the air like smoke. "You're not real family, you're just attached. The children are ours, of course, our blood. But you," she waved her hand dismissively, "you're temporary." The dining room went silent. Even Lisa, Tom's sister, stopped scrolling on her phone. Harold paused his turkey carving. The only sound was the tick-tick-tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway, another piece I'd paid to repair when its mechanisms broke. I smiled, calm, controlled, because in my purse, resting against my hip like a loaded weapon, was an envelope. Inside that envelope was the deed to this house, the real deed, the one with my name on it, the one they didn't know existed. "You're absolutely right, Margaret," I said quietly, reaching for my wine glass. "We should definitely talk about what's real and what isn't. If they only knew what was coming. Can you imagine biting your tongue for years while the people you sacrificed everything for treat you like garbage? Have you ever wanted to watch someone's smug smile crumble when they realize they've pushed the wrong person too far? Stick around, because what I did next changed everything. And if you've ever dealt with toxic family members, you're going to want to see this. Hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this ends. But they didn't know. Oh, if they only knew. Let me take you back to where this all started, because you need to understand something. I didn't come from money. I came from sacrifice. My parents, Maria and Victor, immigrated from Romania when I was 3. We lived in a cramped Brooklyn apartment where the radiator clanged all winter and the summer heat turned our living room into a sauna. My father worked double shifts at a textile factory. My mother cleaned houses for wealthy families in Manhattan, coming home with her hands raw and her back aching. But they had a dream for me: education, opportunity, the American promise. I graduated from City College with a business degree, working 2 jobs to pay for it. By 23, I was analyzing property markets, studying foreclosure lists, learning the game. At 25, I bought my first property, a rundown brownstone in Bed-Stuy for $80,000. 6 months and $30,000 in renovations later, I sold it for $210,000. That profit became my seed money. By 28, I had flipped 7 properties and established my own real estate investment company. I wasn't rich, but I was comfortable, independent, proud. That's when I met Tom. It was November 2014 at a real estate investment seminar in Midtown Manhattan. He was sitting 2 rows ahead of me, this tall, sandy-haired guy with wire-rimmed glasses who kept asking intelligent questions about commercial zoning laws. During the lunch break, we ended up at the same coffee cart outside. He bought me a latte and we talked for 45 minutes about property markets, interest rates, and our mutual love of old architecture. Tom was an engineer. Structural, not software, with a gentle smile and a way of listening that made you feel heard. He told me about his family's old Chicago roots and their Victorian house in the suburbs. The way he described it, the ornate woodwork, the original stained glass, the history embedded in every room, made it sound like something out of a fairy tale. What he didn't mention, what I wouldn't discover until much later, was that the fairy tale was crumbling. The old money was old debt. The beautiful house was mortgaged to the rafters. And his family? They were barely keeping their heads above water, drowning in the kind of financial quicksand that comes from living beyond your means for decades. But that afternoon, drinking coffee as the November wind whipped around us, all I knew was this. Tom was kind. Tom was genuine. And when he asked for my number, I gave it to him without hesitation. We dated for 8 months before Tom proposed on a summer evening in Central Park. The ring was modest. He apologized for that, said he was saving for something better. But I loved it. I loved him. When I called my parents to tell them, my mother cried happy tears. "A good man," she said in her accented English. "That's all that matters." I should have known something was wrong when planning the wedding became a battlefield. Margaret, Tom's mother, inserted herself into every decision. The venue had to be in Chicago, near the family. Fine, I agreed. The guest list had to be approved by her. Okay, I compromised. But when I suggested including some traditional Romanian elements, my grandmother's embroidered cloths for the tables, my mother's recipe for sarmale at the reception, Margaret's face tightened like a fist. "Oh, Elena, dear," she said over tea at her Victorian house, the first time I'd visited, "we're keeping this elegant, classic American, no need for ethnic complications." She smiled, but her eyes were cold. "I'm sure you understand." I didn't understand, but Tom squeezed my hand and whispered, "Let's just keep the peace, babe. It's one day." So I let it go. The wedding in June 2015 was beautiful and completely devoid of anything that represented where I came from. My parents sat quietly in the 3rd row, looking uncomfortable in their borrowed formal wear. Margaret's toast made my stomach clench. To Tom and Elena, may she learn what it means to be part of this family. May she fit in. The guests laughed politely. I smiled through gritted teeth. Tom kissed my cheek and whispered, "She's just old-fashioned. She'll warm up." She never did. After the honeymoon, a weekend in the Wisconsin Dells because Tom's parents needed help with a small financial matter, we moved into a modest house about 20 minutes from Margaret and Harold. Tom said it was important to be close to family. I agreed, not knowing I was building my own prison. The first time I walked through the Victorian house where I'd eventually stage my revenge, I was struck by both its beauty and its decay. The ornate crown moldings were original, but cracked in places. The hardwood floors were gorgeous, but desperately needed refinishing. The stained glass windows cast jeweled light across rooms that smelled faintly of mildew and old carpet. "Isn't it magnificent?" Margaret said, sweeping through the foyer like a queen in her castle. "5 generations of our family have lived here. It's priceless." She emphasized that last word, looking directly at me. The implication was clear. I could never afford such history. I could never truly belong to it. Harold, a barrel-chested man with thinning hair and a permanent scowl, grunted his agreement. Old money, old roots, Not everyone can understand that. I smiled politely, but in my mind I was already analyzing the house with my investor's eye. Foundation issues, outdated electrical, termite damage in the back porch. This wasn't priceless. This was a money pit. If I'd only known how right I was. When I got pregnant with Emma in early 2016, I thought maybe this would be the bridge. Surely a grandchild would soften Margaret's edges, would make me finally feel like I belonged. I was so naive. I was 4 months along when Margaret visited our house for the first time. I'd been painting the nursery, a soft yellow, gender-neutral and warm. I'd chosen a beautiful crib, not expensive but solid and safe. The walls were going to have hand-painted flowers that my mother was planning to do, a gift from her artistic hands to her first grandchild. Margaret walked in, looked around for exactly 10 seconds, and said, "Well, this is cheerful. Very modern." The way she said modern made it sound like a disease. Our family nursery had antique furniture, proper heirlooms, but I suppose you're doing your best with what you know. My mother, who'd been painting flowers in the corner, set down her brush. I saw the hurt flash across her face. I put my hand on her shoulder and said nothing. What could I say? Emma arrived in September 2017, perfect and beautiful with Tom's blue eyes and my dark hair. When we planned her baptism, I made a list of guests, including my parents, my aunt and uncle, my childhood friends. Margaret took the invitation list and reorganized it for flow and balance. Somehow, in her reorganization, my parents' invitation got lost in the mail. They showed up at the church anyway, confused, to find they weren't on the guest list for the reception. Harold shrugged and said there must have been a miscommunication. Margaret didn't even pretend to be sorry. I cried in the bathroom while my mother held my baby. Tom apologized profusely, promised it wouldn't happen again, but it did, over and over, in small ways and large. When Emma took her first steps at 14 months, she was at Margaret's house. I missed it because Margaret had forgotten to invite me to Sunday brunch. When Emma spoke her first word, Mama, Harold joked that it must be genetic confusion because she doesn't look much like our side. Must be her genes diluting the bloodline. I laughed along. Inside, I was dying. Jack came along in 2019, another beautiful baby boy. By then, I'd learned to expect nothing and still somehow be disappointed. Margaret bought Emma expensive gifts and Jack generic hand-me-downs. When I mentioned it to Tom, he said I was being oversensitive. Then came 2020, the pandemic. The world shutting down. Tom and I both worked from home, juggling 2 small children in our careers. Meanwhile, Margaret and Harold, in their mid-60s and at risk, refused to take precautions seriously. I spent March through December delivering their groceries, picking up their prescriptions, making sure they had what they needed. Every Tuesday and Friday, without fail, I drove across town with 2 kids in the car, dropped supplies on their porch, called to make sure they found everything. Did they say thank you? Once, maybe twice. Usually it was criticism. This isn't the brand I like. Or, you forgot the coffee filters. Or, can't you teach those children to be quiet during our phone calls? And through it all, Tom's sister Lisa was a constant presence. Lisa, who'd married a wealthy dermatologist and never worked a day in her life until her divorce in 2022. Lisa with her 2 yappy Pomeranians named Tiffany and Bentley. Lisa who treated me like the help and spoke to me like I was stupid. The pattern was clear. Every family event was family only, which apparently meant everyone except me. Birthday parties where I was expected to stay home with the kids while Tom celebrated with his people. Holiday planning sessions I wasn't invited to. Private family meetings about family matters that concerned my own children. I took it. I swallowed it. I smiled and nodded and played the dutiful daughter-in-law. But I was keeping score. And the balance sheet was getting very, very long. The call came on a Tuesday evening in March 2018. Tom walked in from work, his face pale, his hands shaking. I was making dinner. Emma was playing with blocks on the floor, and I knew immediately something was catastrophically wrong. "My parents are losing the house," he said, and then he started to cry. I'd never seen Tom cry. Not at our wedding, not when our kids were born, not ever. I turned off the stove and held him while he told me everything. Harold's investments had collapsed. The stock market dip in early 2018 had hit his portfolio hard. He'd been heavily leveraged in some risky plays, thinking he could beat the market. He couldn't. He lost almost everything. The pension that was supposed to carry them through retirement? Gone, eaten up trying to cover losses. The Victorian house they were so proud of had a $300,000 mortgage. They'd refinanced multiple times over the years, pulling out equity to maintain their lifestyle, to keep up appearances. Now they were $50,000 behind on payments. The bank had sent a foreclosure notice. They had 90 days. "It's been in the family for generations," Tom said, his voice breaking. "My grandfather bought it in 1952. My dad grew up there. I grew up there. If they lose it—" He couldn't finish the sentence. I held him and made soothing sounds, but my mind was already working. This was what I did. I analyzed properties, found solutions, made deals. "Let me look at the numbers," I said. "Maybe there's something we can do." Over the next week, I dug deep. I pulled the property records, analyzed the market, looked at comparable sales. The house, despite its problems, was in a good neighborhood. With proper renovation, it could be worth $750,000, maybe $800,000. But in its current state, with a foreclosure looming, the bank would auction it for pennies on the dollar. I ran the numbers a dozen different ways. Then I called a lawyer I knew who specialized in real estate law, Mr. Reynolds. He was a friend of my father's, a dignified man in his 60s who'd helped me structure my LLC years ago. "I can buy it through your holding company," he said. "The bank wants it off their books. They'll take $400,000 to settle the debt and close the file. You'll own it free and clear, and they can stay as long as you want them to." $400,000. It would take almost everything I'd saved, every profit from every flip, my entire emergency fund. But I'd still have my business, my income properties, my ability to earn. And Tom would have his family history preserved. There was just one problem: Margaret and Harold's pride. If they knew I'd bought their house, it would destroy them. Harold especially. He'd rather live under a bridge than accept charity from me, the immigrant's daughter who wasn't real family. Margaret would spend the rest of her life resenting me, making sure everyone knew I'd stolen their home. Tom and I talked about it for hours. Finally, we decided we'd tell them the bank agreed to refinance. We'd say some investor bought the note and restructured the loan. They could stay, payment-free, and we'd handle everything through anonymous channels. Their pride intact, their home saved, our marriage preserved. On a sunny April morning, I sat in Mr. Reynolds' office and signed the papers. $5,000 for the LLC setup. $400,000 for the house purchase. Closing costs, transfer taxes, legal fees, another $15,000. My entire financial cushion gone. Tom squeezed my hand. "Thank you," he whispered. "You're saving them." I smiled, but I made sure to keep copies of everything. Every document, every signature, every receipt, just in case. Owning the house was just the beginning. Maintaining it became my second full-time job. June 2018, the roof leaked during a storm, water pouring into the attic and damaging the ceiling in the master bedroom. Margaret called Tom in hysterics. I called a roofing company, paid $10,000 for emergency repairs and new shingles. Margaret told her bridge club it was covered by insurance. September 2018, the HVAC system died during a heat wave. Harold called Tom complaining about the heat. I called an HVAC company, paid $15,000 for a complete system replacement. Harold told his golf buddies the warranty covered it. Property taxes every year, $8,000. I paid through an anonymous escrow account. Homeowners insurance, $3,000 annually. I paid that too. Water, gas, electric. I set up automatic payments through my LLC, made sure everything was seamless and invisible. March 2021. I decided the kitchen was too dated. If they were going to brag about this house, it should at least look the part. I hired contractors, oversaw the renovation remotely. Granite countertops, $8,000. Stainless steel appliances, $12,000. New cabinets, $15,000. Tile backsplash, lighting, plumbing updates, another $5,000. Total investment, $40,000. Margaret hosted a brunch 2 weeks after completion. I heard her through the walls. I'd stopped by to drop off a gift for Emma's birthday. Yes, we finally upgraded, she told her friends. We saved for years. Such a relief to finally do it. I stood in the hallway listening to her take credit for my money, my effort, my vision. I went home and added it to my journal. I'd started keeping track of everything in a leather notebook hidden in my office. Every expense, every payment, every slight and insult attached to a dollar amount. The numbers grew staggering. Total investment by November 2023, $217,000. That didn't count the $400,000 purchase price, just the maintenance, the upgrades, the endless parade of repairs that came with a house built in 1952. Tom knew generally that I was helping with costs. He didn't know the specifics. He didn't know about the journal, the photographs of receipts, the careful documentation. I was building a case. I just didn't know yet what I was going to do with it. Everything changed in September 2022 when Lisa's marriage imploded. Her dermatologist husband caught her having an affair with their pool boy, a cliché so perfect it would be funny if it wasn't about to make my life hell. Lisa moved back home with her parents, bringing her 2 yappy Pomeranians and enough luggage to fill 3 bedrooms. Suddenly, the house I was paying for became crowded. Suddenly, family dinners I was barely tolerated at became just immediate family, no room for extras. The first text came in March 2023, 2 months before Tom's 40th birthday. I was helping Emma with homework when Tom's phone buzzed. He showed me the screen. Lisa, birthday party planning Sunday at 2. Just real family. We'll loop Tom in on the details. I felt something crack inside my chest. Just real family. As if I wasn't his wife. As if I hadn't spent 8 years trying to belong. As if my money wasn't keeping their roof over their heads. Tom saw my face. "I'll talk to her," he said. "No," I replied. My voice was calm, cold. "Don't." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Tom snoring softly beside me, and I made a decision. I'd had enough. 8 years of swallowing insults, 8 years of being excluded, 8 years of financial support with zero gratitude. The next morning, I called my best friend Sarah. She's a therapist, and over the years, she'd listened to countless stories of my in-law horror show. We met for coffee. "When are you going to stand up for yourself?" she asked, stirring her latte. "You know they're never going to change, right? You could save them 100 more times, and they'd still treat you like garbage." "I know," I said. And I did. Finally, truly, I knew. 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, I started gathering evidence. I drove to Mr. Reynolds' office with my journal, my receipts, my bank statements. I laid it all out on his desk. He reviewed everything, his expression never changing. Finally, he looked up at me. "Elena," he said quietly, "this is airtight. You own that house free and clear. You can evict them with 30 days' notice, but—" He paused. "Are you sure you want to do this?" I thought about Margaret's sneer, Lisa's text, 8 years of being invisible. "Make it educational," I said. "They need to learn what happens when you treat people like they don't matter." "The deed is already in your name," he said. "They just don't know it yet." I smiled. For the first time in years, I felt powerful. "Let's keep it that way," I said, "until the perfect moment." The alarm went off at 5:30 on Thanksgiving morning. I didn't need it. I'd been awake since 4, staring at the ceiling, my heart hammering with a mixture of anticipation and something that felt dangerously close to joy. Today was the day. I slipped out of bed without waking Tom, padded down to our kitchen in the pre-dawn darkness. Through the window above the sink, frost painted intricate patterns on the glass, the kind of cold that makes the whole world look frozen in time. Perfect. I wanted everything crystallized, preserved, memorable. I preheated the oven and pulled out my ingredients. 2 pies, apple for Harold, because he always complained if there wasn't apple pie at Thanksgiving, and pumpkin for the kids, Emma and Jack, who loved the way I swirled whipped cream on top. I worked methodically, rolling out dough, slicing Granny Smith apples paper thin the way my mother taught me, mixing cinnamon and nutmeg and sugar. The cinnamon was fitting, I thought, sprinkling it over the apples, sweet and sharp at once, like the smile I'd been wearing for 8 years, masking the bitterness underneath. But not today. Today the mask would come off. By 7, the pies were in the oven, and the house smelled like autumn and promises. Tom wandered down in his pajamas, hair sticking up, reaching for the coffee I'd already brewed. "You're up early," he said, kissing my cheek. "Excited for today?" I smiled. If only he knew. Just want everything to be perfect. It will be. Mom texted last night. She's really looking forward to seeing everyone. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. Thank you for always being patient with them. I know they can be difficult. Difficult. That was one word for it. I patted his hand, not trusting myself to speak. By 9, the pies were cooling on wire racks and I was getting dressed. I chose my outfit carefully, a burgundy sweater dress that made me look confident and put together, paired with my grandmother's pearl earrings. Armor. I wanted to look like someone who belonged, even though we all knew I never would. In the bathroom, I stood before the mirror and applied my makeup with steady hands. Foundation, mascara, a bold red lip, war paint. My reflection stared back at me. Dark eyes, determined jaw, the face of a woman who'd finally had enough. From my purse on the bed, I retrieved the envelope. Cream-colored, official, heavy with consequence. Inside, the deed to 428 Rosewood Avenue, the Victorian house that had haunted my marriage. My name on the title, clear as day. Tax records showing 5 years of payments. A formal eviction notice drafted by Mr. Reynolds, giving them until January 1st to vacate the premises. Legal, binding, devastating. I slid it into my large handbag, tucked beneath my wallet where Tom wouldn't see it. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Today's the day. You've got this. Let them panic, then let them reflect. That's how they learn." I typed back, "Thank you for everything. Wish me luck." Her response was immediate. "You don't need luck. You have truth. That's better." By 10:30, we were loading the car. Tom carried the pies in their carriers while I buckled the kids into their car seats. Emma, 7 years old and already too perceptive, looked at me with those serious blue eyes. "Mommy, are you okay? You look different." I smoothed her dark hair. My hair, not Tom's, despite Harold's constant comments about diluted bloodlines. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just thinking about Grandma and Grandpa." "Are they going to be mean again?" Jack asked from his booster seat, his little voice uncertain. My heart clenched. Even my 5-year-old son had noticed. Even he felt the undercurrent of hostility that ran through every family gathering. That's what finally made this not just justified, but necessary. My children were learning that it was okay to be treated poorly by family. That acceptance meant swallowing abuse. Not anymore. "Everything's going to be different today," I told them, and it was the first completely honest thing I'd said all morning. Tom climbed into the driver's seat, cheerful and oblivious. He turned on the radio, holiday music, Bing Crosby crooning about white Christmases, and pulled out of our driveway. The 20-minute drive to his parents' house stretched before us. 20 minutes until everything changed. I watched the familiar streets roll past, houses decorated with fall wreaths and inflatable turkeys. I'd driven this route hundreds of times over the years. Every holiday, every birthday, every Sunday dinner, where I'd been tolerated at best and humiliated at worst. But today would be the last time I made this drive as the outsider. Today, I was coming as the owner. My hand drifted to my purse, feeling the outline of the envelope beneath the leather. The weight of it was satisfying. Physical proof. Undeniable truth. Tom reached over and squeezed my knee. "Love you, babe. Thanks for being such a good sport about all this." A good sport. As if 8 years of psychological warfare was just a game. As if their cruelty was just quirky family dynamics I needed to tolerate. I squeezed his hand back and said nothing. Soon, very soon, everyone would understand exactly what kind of sport I'd been playing all along. The Victorian house at 428 Rosewood Avenue looked like something from a Christmas card as we pulled into the driveway. Margaret had outdone herself with decorations, fall wreaths on every window, strings of orange lights along the porch railing, a scarecrow arrangement by the front door. From the outside, it screamed tradition, warmth, family heritage. From the inside, I knew every crack in the foundation, every water stain on the ceiling, every dollar it took to keep this illusion standing. We parked behind Lisa's BMW, a gift from her ex-husband that she'd managed to keep in the divorce. Tom grabbed the pie carriers while I helped the kids out of their car seats. They ran ahead, excited despite everything, because they were children, and children still believed in the goodness of grandparents. The front door swung open before we reached it. Margaret stood framed in the doorway, perfectly coiffed in a cream cashmere sweater and wool slacks, her signature pearl necklace catching the light. She looked expensive, elegant, every inch the matriarch of an important family. "Tom, darling!" She pulled him into a hug, air-kissing both his cheeks. "And my precious grandchildren." She bent down, carefully, always careful of her back, to embrace Emma and Jack. Come in, Grandpa's been waiting." Then her eyes landed on me. The warmth drained from her face like water down a sink. She gave me a single nod, the kind you'd give a delivery person. "Elena, you made it." As if I had a choice. As if I wasn't married to her son and the mother of her grandchildren. "Happy Thanksgiving, Margaret," I said, my voice honey-sweet. I held out the pies. I brought Harold's favorite, apple with cinnamon. She took them with the tips of her fingers, as if they might contaminate her. How quaint, I'm sure they'll be fine. We have so much food already. But it's the thought that counts, isn't it? She turned away, calling over her shoulder, "Come in, don't let the cold air in." I crossed the threshold of my house, and felt the familiar mixture of fury and satisfaction. The foyer smelled like roasting turkey, and the cinnamon potpourri. Margaret always simmered on the stove. The chandelier overhead, the one I'd had rewired for $4,000, cast warm light over hardwood floors I'd had refinished for $8,000. To the left, the living room where Lisa was sprawled on the velvet couch. My couch, reupholstered last year for $3,000. Her 2 Pomeranians, Tiffany and Bentley, yapped at our arrival, their high-pitched barking like nails on a chalkboard. Lisa barely glanced up from her phone. "Hey, bro," she called to Tom, then to me, with considerably less enthusiasm, "Elena." The dogs ran circles around my feet, one of them attempting to hump my leg. I stepped around them, heading toward the dining room where Harold's voice boomed. "There's my boy, come help me with this bird." The dining room table was already set with Margaret's good china, the Lenox set she'd inherited from her mother. Crystal wine glasses, silver candlesticks, the whole production. The antique lace tablecloth, the one Emma would later baptize with cranberry sauce, was spread perfectly, not a wrinkle visible. Through the doorway to the kitchen, I could see Harold at the counter, carving knife in hand, standing over the turkey like a conquering general. He was wearing his Kiss the Cook apron, a Father's Day gift from Tom years ago, and his face was already flushed with the 2 bourbon old-fashions I knew he'd downed before noon. "Tom, get in here and witness this magnificent bird." Harold waved the knife. 22 pounds of perfection. Your mother ordered it from that fancy butcher in Lincoln Park. 22 pounds at $8 a pound from the fancy butcher. Another receipt in my mental ledger. Tom joined his father in the kitchen. I could hear their male bonding. The easy laughter, the casual affection that came so naturally when I wasn't part of the equation. I stood in the dining room, surveying the spread. Mashed potatoes, sweet potato casserole with marshmallows, green bean casserole, stuffing, cranberry sauce, dinner rolls. All of it beautifully prepared. All of it funded by the utilities and maintenance I paid for this kitchen. "Mommy, can I play with my dolls in the other room?" Emma tugged at my dress. "Of course, sweetie. Stay where I can see you, okay?" The kids disappeared into the living room, their voices mixing with the yapping dogs. I moved to help set out serving dishes, but Margaret intercepted me. "Oh, Elena, you don't need to help. You're a guest." The emphasis on guest was subtle, but cutting. Not family. Guest. "I don't mind. Really, it's fine. Why don't you just sit down, relax?" She gestured to the couch where Lisa was still glued to her phone. "Lisa, dear, do entertain Elena." Lisa glanced up long enough to smirk. "So, Elena, what is it you do again? Real estate stuff?" "Real estate investment," I said evenly. "I flip properties, manage rental units." Right. Must be nice to work with houses. Such a practical profession." The way she said practical made it sound like manual labor. I always wanted to marry someone in finance. Someone with real money. But I guess we all have different priorities. There it was. The first dig of the day. Married for love, not status. That's what her tone implied. The irony was so thick I could taste it. Lisa, who'd never worked a day in her adult life until her doctor husband divorced her for infidelity. Lisa, who was living rent-free in a house I owned. I smiled. Different priorities indeed. Small talk continued for the next half hour. Weather, unusually cold for November. Football, the Bears were having a terrible season. Work, Tom's engineering project was going well. Every topic carefully avoided any real substance, any genuine connection. We were actors performing a play called Normal Family Thanksgiving, and everyone except me believed the performance was real. Harold emerged from the kitchen, the turkey on a massive platter. "Ladies and gentlemen, dinner is served." We took our seats around the table, Tom at Margaret's right, Harold at the head, Lisa across from Tom, me at the far end, closest to the kitchen, the position of service rather than honor. The kids sat between Tom and me, a buffer zone. Margaret led us in grace. "Bless this food and this family," and I bowed my head, hiding my smile. This family, about to learn exactly what family really meant. The meal began. The first 15 minutes were almost pleasant. Almost. The turkey was perfectly moist, credit to Harold's cooking skills. One of the few things I could genuinely compliment. The mashed potatoes were creamy, the stuffing savory with sage and onions. I watched Emma and Jack eat their food with good manners, pride swelling in my chest. Whatever else was wrong with this family, my children were turning out beautifully. "Emma, sweetheart, how's school?" Margaret asked, her grandmother voice warm and genuine. With the kids, she could be truly loving. It was only with me that the mask slipped. "It's good, Grandma. I got an A on my book report about Charlotte's Web." "That's wonderful, such a smart girl. Tom, she gets that from your side, obviously." Obviously. Because God forbid she inherit intelligence from my immigrant parents, both of whom spoke 4 languages and built lives from nothing. I took a sip of wine and said nothing. Harold carved himself another piece of turkey. "This bird cost a fortune, but it's worth it. You can't skimp on Thanksgiving, not when you have standards to maintain." Standards, maintained by my money. The irony was delicious, better than any of the food on this table. "The kitchen looks amazing, Margaret," Tom said. "That renovation really modernized everything." Margaret preened. Yes, we'd been saving for years. Finally had enough to do it properly. Granite countertops, top-of-the-line appliances. We spared no expense. I gripped my fork tighter. We spared no expense. With my $40,000, my contractors, my design choices. "It's beautiful," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "You must be so proud." "Oh, we are. It's important to maintain a home's value. This house has been in the family for generations. We have a responsibility to preserve it. Margaret's eyes met mine across the table, and I saw the message there. You could never understand this. You have no heritage worth preserving. The undercurrents of hostility were building like storm clouds. Tom felt it. I saw him shift uncomfortably in his seat, but he said nothing. He never did. Lisa refilled her wine glass, her third, I noticed. You know what I was thinking about today? My wedding. Remember, Mom? The venue, the flowers, the designer dress, everything perfect, everything elegant. She looked at me. The comparison was clear. Her wedding had been a society event, written up in local magazines, 500 guests at a country club. Mine had been intimate, small, my family's traditions vetoed. It was beautiful, dear, Margaret agreed. A proper wedding. The kind that matters. I set down my fork. The sound of silver on china seemed louder than it should. Every wedding matters when two people love each other. Of course, Lisa said quickly, but her smile was sharp. I just mean some people marry for love. Others marry for other reasons. Social climbing, financial security, that sort of thing. The room went very still. Tom's face flushed. Lisa, what the hell? I'm just making conversation. She laughed, but it was hollow. Elena knows I'm kidding. We're all family here, right? We can joke. Jokes. Always jokes. Cruelty wrapped in laughter, impossible to call out without seeming oversensitive. Right, I said softly. Family. Emma reached for the cranberry sauce then, her small hand knocking the crystal bowl. It happened in slow motion, the bowl tipping. The deep red sauce spilling across the pristine white lace tablecloth, spreading like blood from a wound. Emma! Margaret's shriek cut through the room. She jumped up, her face horrified. Oh my God, this tablecloth, this is a family heirloom. This cloth was my grandmother's. Emma burst into tears. I'm sorry, Grandma, I'm sorry. Elena, control your child, Harold barked, half standing. This house has history, real family history. These things are irreplaceable. It was an accident, I said, putting my arm around Emma's shaking shoulders. She's 7 years old. An accident that wouldn't have happened if she'd been taught proper table manners, Margaret snapped, dabbing frantically at the stain. But I suppose that's not a priority in some households. Some households. Mine. The household with immigrant parents who worked themselves to exhaustion. The household that wasn't good enough for this precious family. Tom found his voice. Mom, that's enough. It's just cranberry sauce. Just cranberry sauce? Just... Margaret looked like she might cry. This is lace from 1947. It's been through 5 generations, and now it's ruined because... She stopped herself, but the implication hung in the air. Because of my daughter. Because of me. Lisa's dogs chose that moment to start barking again, running circles around the table, their tags jingling. The chaos was building, spiraling, everyone's voices rising. Harold gestured with his fork at our side of the table, his words slurring slightly from bourbon. You know what your problem is, Elena? You don't understand tradition. You didn't grow up with anything real, anything permanent. Just cheap apartments and cheap furniture. Not like this. He waved his hand around. Not like real family heirlooms, real history. Not like your side's plastic crap. Plastic crap. My parents' sacrifices, their carefully saved furniture, the few precious items they'd brought from Romania. Plastic crap. Something inside me shifted, cracked, broke open. Tom's hand found mine under the table. Dad, that is completely uncalled for. Oh, don't defend her, Lisa interjected. We're all thinking it. She married into this family, but she's never really been part of it. She doesn't get it. She never will. The table fell silent except for Emma's quiet crying and Jack's whimper, my children feeling the hate directed at their mother, my babies learning that their grandmother's tablecloth mattered more than their feelings. Margaret set down her napkin with elaborate care. She looked directly at me, her face composed now, cold and certain. She pointed her fork in my direction like a weapon. Let's be honest here, dear." Her voice was sugar over poison. "You're not real family. You're just attached. The children, of course, they're ours. Our blood, our legacy. But you?" She shook her head, that pitying smile on her lips. "You're temporary. You've always been temporary. An outsider who managed to marry in, but you'll never truly belong here." The words landed like physical blows. Temporary. Outsider. Not real family. The room had gone completely silent. Even the dogs stopped barking. Harold watched with a satisfied expression. Lisa's smirk was barely hidden behind her wine glass. Tom looked stricken, his mouth opening to protest, but I held up my hand, stopped him, because this was the moment. This was what I'd been waiting for. "It's okay," I whispered to Tom, my voice calm, unnaturally calm, deadly calm. Inside, I was smiling. Inside, I was electric with vindication. Showtime. I pushed back my chair slowly, stood up with deliberate grace. "If you'll excuse me for just a moment," I said to the table, "I need to get something from my purse." Margaret waved her hand dismissively. "Of course. Take your time." I walked out of the dining room, my heart pounding, but my steps measured. Behind me, I heard Margaret mutter something about oversensitive, and Harold's low chuckle. They had no idea. No idea at all. In the foyer, I retrieved my purse from where I'd left it on the side table. My hands were steady as I opened it. Pulled out the cream-colored envelope that had been waiting for this exact moment. Everything I'd endured, every insult, every exclusion, every dollar spent. It all came down to this. I walked back into the dining room. Actually, I didn't go straight back. I detoured to the powder room off the hallway, the one with the marble sink I'd had installed for $1,200 when the pipes burst 2 winters ago. I needed a moment, just one moment to compose myself, to make sure I was ready for what came next. I set the envelope on the counter and gripped the edge of the sink, staring at my reflection in the mirror. My makeup was still perfect. My red lipstick hadn't smudged. I looked calm, collected, powerful. But my hands were shaking just slightly, adrenaline flooding my system. This was it. The moment I'd been planning for 3 weeks. The moment that would change everything. I pulled out my phone. A text from Sarah sent just minutes ago. "Remember, let them panic first. Let them realize what they've done. Then let them reflect. That's how people learn." I typed back, "About to do it. Wish me luck." Her response came immediately. "You don't need luck. You have truth, and truth is a bomb. Drop it." I opened the envelope one more time, just to verify everything was there. The deed to 428 Rosewood Avenue, stamped and official, with my name, Elena Marie Torres, listed as sole owner. The property tax records showing 5 years of payments from my LLC, utility bills, all in my company's name. And finally, the eviction notice, drafted by Mr. Spencer Reynolds with cold legal precision. "You are hereby notified that your tenancy at the above referenced property will terminate on January 1st, 2024. You are required to vacate the premises by 11:59 p.m. on that date. Failure to comply will result in legal eviction proceedings." 37 days. They had 37 days from today to find somewhere else to live. Long enough to be merciful, short enough to be devastating. I closed the envelope and took a deep breath, then another. I thought about my children's confused faces when Emma spilled the cranberry sauce. I thought about Harold's sneer, "Plastic crap." I thought about 8 years of being called a gold digger, an outsider, temporary. I thought about my parents, Maria and Victor, who'd given me everything they had and taught me that dignity was earned through action, not bloodlines. In the mirror, my reflection smiled back at me. Not the fake smile I'd worn for years, a real smile, fierce, satisfied, ready. I picked up the envelope and my phone. One more text to Mr. Reynolds. "It's happening now." His response, "Remember, everything in that packet is legally binding. They can't fight it. You own that house free and clear. Don't let them intimidate you. Me? Intimidated? Not anymore. Never again. I opened the powder room door and walked back toward the dining room. I could hear their voices, Margaret complaining about the stain, Lisa suggesting some expensive stain remover, Harold pontificating about the value of maintaining heirlooms. Tom was trying to comfort Emma, his voice gentle with his daughter, even as his parents attacked her mother. My heels clicked on the hardwood floor, the floor I'd had refinished. Past the living room with furniture I'd saved from water damage, under the chandelier I'd rewired, through the house that I owned, that I'd preserved, that I'd poured hundreds of thousands of dollars into. My house, my investment, my property, and they had no idea. I paused in the doorway of the dining room, envelope in hand, and watched them for just a moment. Margaret dabbing at the tablecloth, Harold refilling his bourbon, Lisa scrolling her phone, Tom looking exhausted and defeated. This family that had never wanted me, this family that had made me feel small and worthless and temporary, this family that was about to learn what happens when you underestimate the outsider. I stepped into the room. "I'm back," I said pleasantly, "and I have something to share with everyone." I walked to my seat but remained standing. The envelope in my hands, every eye in the room turned toward me. Some curious, some annoyed, all of them completely unprepared for what was about to happen. "Margaret, Harold, Lisa," I said, my voice clear and steady. "Since we're discussing family and homes and what's real and what's temporary, I think it's time we had an honest conversation." Tom looked up at me, confused. "Elena, what?" "It's okay, honey." I placed my hand on his shoulder. I should have had this conversation a long time ago. I held up the envelope. "This contains some important documents. I think everyone should see them." Margaret's eyebrows rose. "Documents? Really, Elena, this is hardly the time. Actually, it's the perfect time." I walked around the table slowly, deliberately, until I stood beside Margaret's seat at the head of the table. The polished oak surface gleamed beneath the chandelier light. Oak I'd had professionally refinished for $1,500 3 years ago. "Since you just reminded me that I'm not real family, that I'm temporary, that I don't belong here." I slid the envelope across the table. It made a soft sound against the wood, barely audible over the ticking of the grandfather clock. "Open it," I said simply. Margaret stared at the envelope like it might contain a snake. Then, with her perfectly manicured nails, the same hands that had air-kissed her son and dismissed me, she picked it up. Her fingers worked at the seal, tearing it open with a soft ripping sound. She pulled out the papers. The deed was on top. I watched her face. This was what I'd come for, this exact moment, the moment when her world shifted beneath her feet. Her eyes scanned the document. Once, twice. Her face, so composed and superior just seconds ago, began to pale. The color drained from her cheeks like water from a bathtub. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. "What?" she whispered. "What is this?" Harold leaned over, snatching the paper from her hands. His reading glasses were on the table. He grabbed them, shoved them on his face, squinted at the document. "A deed? This is a deed to this house. But that's impossible. We own—" "You don't," I said quietly. The words fell into the room like stones into still water. "You don't own this house. I do." The silence was absolute. Even the children had gone quiet, sensing something momentous was happening. "Elena!" Tom's voice was barely audible. "What are you talking about?" I kept my eyes on Margaret and Harold. "In March of 2018, this house went into foreclosure. You were $50,000 behind on a $300,000 mortgage. The bank was going to auction it off. You were going to lose everything. The house your grandfather bought, the house you've called home for decades, all of it. Gone." Harold's face was turning red. "We refinanced. We found an investor who—" "You found me." I let that sink in for a beat. "I bought this house through my LLC. I paid off your debts, settled with the bank, and took title. For 5 years, you've been living here rent-free, not because of some mysterious investor, not because of a miracle refinancing, because of me. Margaret's hands started trembling. The paper slipped from her fingers, scattering across the cranberry-stained tablecloth. No, you're lying. Tom, tell her she's lying. Tom's face had gone white. He looked at me, then at his parents, then back at me. Elena, is this true? It's true. I gestured to the papers. It's all there. The deed with my name on it. 5 years of property tax payments, utility bills, insurance, maintenance, repairs. I moved around the table, my voice steady but growing stronger. The roof that leaked in 2018, $10,000. I paid for it. The HVAC system that died that same summer, $15,000. I paid for that too. The kitchen renovation in 2021 that you bragged about to everyone? I looked directly at Margaret. $40,000, every bit of it paid for by me. You're insane, Harold sputtered. This is fraud. This is legal. I pulled out another document from my purse, Mr. Reynolds' letter on official law firm letterhead. My attorney has verified everything. The title is clean. The deed is legitimate. I own this house free and clear. You've been living in my property for 5 years. Lisa finally looked up from her phone, her face a mixture of shock and dawning horror. Wait, you're saying this whole time? This whole time, I confirmed. I've been the landlord. I've been paying for everything. The property taxes, $8,000 a year. The insurance, $3,000 annually. Every repair, every maintenance issue, every upgrade. That beautiful granite you cook on, Margaret? Mine. Those stainless steel appliances? Mine. The rewired chandelier, the refinished floors, the new water heater, all of it. Mine. I pulled out my phone, brought up my files. I have receipts for everything, bank transfers, contractor invoices, 5 years of documentation. Would you like to see them? Why? Margaret's voice cracked. Why would you do this? Because Tom was heartbroken at the thought of his family losing their home, because I loved him enough to save it, because I thought, I laughed, but it was bitter. I actually thought that maybe, just maybe, if I did something this big, this generous, you might finally accept me, that I might finally be real family instead of temporary. The word temporary hung in the air like smoke. Elena, Tom said, standing up. His voice was shaking. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me it was your money? Because you would have felt guilty. Because your parents' pride couldn't handle knowing that the immigrant's daughter, the outsider, the woman who married for status, I threw Lisa's earlier words back at them, had saved them from financial ruin. Harold found his voice, trying to muster his usual bluster. This is ridiculous. We'll fight this. We'll get lawyers. This house has been in our family for 70 years, I finished. I know. You've reminded me many times. But the law doesn't care about tradition, Harold. The law cares about who holds the title. And that's me. I gestured to the final document in the envelope. That's an eviction notice. You have until January 1st to vacate the premises, 37 days. Eviction? Margaret's voice rose to a near shriek. You can't evict us. This is our home. No, I said softly, looking around the dining room, at the walls I'd maintained, the floors I'd preserved, the fixtures I'd updated. This is my home. I bought it. I've paid for it. I've preserved it. And since I'm not real family, since I'm just attached and temporary, I think it's time for the temporary person to make some permanent decisions. I picked up my wine glass and took a sip, savoring the moment. Small victory number 1, watching their faces realize that everything they thought was solid ground had just turned to quicksand. You have until New Year's Day, I repeated. Consider it my final gift to this family. Now, if you'll excuse me, I think we're done with Thanksgiving dinner. For approximately 5 seconds, no one moved. No one spoke. The grandfather clock ticked in the hallway. Tiffany and Bentley, Lisa's Pomeranians, whined softly from the living room. Emma and Jack stared at their plates, confused by the adult tension crackling through the air. Then all hell broke loose. "This is insane!" Harold roared, lurching to his feet. His chair scraped against the floor with an ugly screech. "You can't just... You have no right. This is our house, our family home." "Actually, the deed says otherwise." I remained calm, sipping my wine like we were discussing the weather. Margaret's hands were shaking so hard she could barely hold the papers. I don't understand. Tom, explain this. Tell me she's making this up. Tell me this isn't real." Tom looked like he'd been hit by a truck. He picked up the deed with trembling fingers, his eyes scanning the legal text. I watched his face as comprehension dawned. The date of purchase, the LLC name I'd shown him when we set up the refinancing story, the property tax documents that proved continuous ownership. "Oh my God," he whispered. "Elena, this is all true. You really did buy the house. You've been paying for everything this whole time." "Yes," I said simply. "Why didn't you tell me?" His voice broke. 5 years, Elena. 5 years of lying." "I didn't lie. I kept a secret to protect your family's pride. There's a difference." I gestured to his parents. "Would they have accepted it if they'd known? Would your father's ego have survived knowing that I, the gold digger, the outsider with plastic crap for family heritage, saved them from losing everything?" Harold's face was turning an alarming shade of purple. "You're a liar, a manipulator. You've been holding this over our heads, waiting for the perfect moment to what? To finally stand up for myself after being called temporary? After being told I'm not real family? After 8 years of being excluded and insulted and treated like I don't matter?" My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. "I held my tongue for years, Harold. I swallowed every insult, every slight, every cruel comment. I did it for Tom. I did it for my children. But you just told my 7-year-old daughter that her grandmother's tablecloth is more important than her feelings. You called my parents' sacrifices plastic crap. So no, I'm done holding my tongue." Lisa burst into tears. Actual tears, streaming down her face, mascara running in black rivulets. "Where are we supposed to go? I just moved back here after the divorce. I have nothing. Nowhere to go. You can't just throw us out." "I gave you 37 days. That's more than legally required." I pulled out Mr. Reynolds' letter again, held it up. "This letter explains everything. The eviction is legal, binding, and fair. You're welcome to consult your own attorney, but they'll tell you the same thing." "You bitch!" Harold spat. The word hung in the air like a curse. "You've been planning this, waiting for your moment. This is calculated. This is cruel." "No," I said, my voice dropping to ice. "Cruel is telling someone they're not real family. Cruel is making them feel like an outsider in their own marriage. Cruel is 8 years of psychological warfare disguised as family tradition." "This?" I gestured to the eviction notice. "This is consequences." Margaret finally found her voice, though it came out strangled. "You did this on purpose. You wanted us to say something horrible so you could justify this attack." "I didn't make you say those things, Margaret. You chose your words. You chose your cruelty. I just chose to stop accepting it." Tom grabbed my arm. "Elena, this is my family, my parents. You can't just—" "I can, and I have." I met his eyes. "Tom, I did this for you. 5 years ago, I bought this house to save your family because you asked me to, because I loved you, because I thought it might build a bridge. But they've spent 5 years burning that bridge from both ends, and today they finally burned it completely. But eviction, throwing them out?" His face was anguished. "There has to be another way." There was another way. It was called treating me with basic respect. It was called acknowledging my humanity. It was called being actual family, instead of just saying the words. I turned back to Margaret and Harold. "You have until New Year's Day. You can cooperate and make this easy, or you can fight and make it ugly. Either way, the outcome is the same." Margaret's wine glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the hardwood floor. Red wine spread across the wood like blood. The wood I'd had refinished, now marked by her shock and rage. She didn't even notice. "You've destroyed us," she whispered. "Do you understand that? You've destroyed this family." "No," I said firmly. "You destroyed this family every time you treated me like garbage, every time you excluded me, every time you made your grandchildren feel the hate directed at their mother. I'm just the one who finally had enough." I gathered Emma and Jack, pulling them close. They clung to me, sensing the magnitude of what was happening, even if they didn't fully understand it. Harold paced the room, muttering about lawyers. Threats, legal action. Lisa sobbed into her hands. Margaret sat frozen, staring at the scattered papers like they were a bomb that had just exploded her world. Tom stood in the middle of it all, torn between his wife and his parents, his face a mask of confusion and pain. I pulled out my phone and texted Sarah, "Phase 1 complete, it's done." Her response came immediately, "How do you feel?" I looked around the room, at the chaos, the tears, the panic. I looked at my children holding on to me. I looked at the deed on the table, my name in black and white. I texted back, "Powerful." Then I said to Tom, "Get the kids' coats, we're leaving." Elena, "Now Tom, we're done here." "You can't just leave," Margaret cried. "We need to talk about this. We need to figure out—" "Talk to my attorney," I said, heading for the foyer. "His contact information is in that envelope. All future communication goes through him." I grabbed our coats, helped Emma into hers, while Tom mechanically did the same for Jack. Behind us, the living room had erupted into arguments. Harold yelling, Lisa crying, Margaret pleading. I opened the front door, letting in a blast of cold November air. 37 days, I called back over my shoulder. "Don't forget to start packing." Then I walked out of that house, my house, and didn't look back. We made it to the driveway before Tom stopped walking. He just stood there, keys in hand, staring at nothing. The kids climbed into the car, but he remained frozen on the cold concrete. "Tom," I said gently. He turned to me, and I saw tears on his face. "Elena, what did you just do?" I stood up for myself, for us, for our children. By threatening to make my parents homeless? By enforcing boundaries they refused to respect. I moved closer, keeping my voice low so the kids wouldn't hear through the car windows. "Tom, they weren't going to change. You know that. How many times have you asked them to be kinder to me? How many times have they promised to try and then gone right back to the same behavior?" He shook his head, speechless. "Come on," I said, opening the driver's door. "Let's get the kids home, then we can talk." The 20-minute drive back to our house was silent except for Emma's questions. "Mommy, why was everyone yelling?" And Jack's small voice asking, "Are we in trouble?" "No, babies," I assured them. "You're not in trouble. Grown-up stuff, okay? Everything's going to be fine." At home, I settled the kids in front of a movie with leftover pie. Yes, I'd grabbed both pies from Margaret's kitchen on our way out. And then Tom and I sat at our kitchen table, the same table where we'd eaten breakfast just that morning when everything was still secret and contained. "Show me," he said finally. "Show me everything." So I did. I pulled out my laptop, opened my carefully organized files. Every receipt, every bank transfer, every invoice from contractors, utility companies, insurance providers, 5 years of documentation, hundreds of transactions, all proof of my secret ownership and maintenance of his family home. Tom's eyes widened as I scrolled through the records. The roof in 2018, that was $10,000, $10,347 to be exact. The HVAC, $15,000. The kitchen renovation, $40,212. I pulled up that invoice specifically, showed him the contractor's detailed breakdown. Your mother told everyone she'd saved up for years to do it. She bragged about it at her bridge club, posted photos on Facebook. It was all my money, Tom, my design choices, my contractors. His hands were shaking as he scrolled through the documents. All of this. Why didn't you tell me? We're married. We're supposed to share everything. Because you would have felt guilty. Because you would have tried to pay me back even though we couldn't afford it. Because I took a deep breath. Because I thought if I did enough, gave enough, sacrificed enough, they might finally accept me. That I might finally belong. Elena. But I never would I? No matter what I did. I could have given them $1 million and I'd still be the outsider, the temporary one, not real family. Tom covered his face with his hands. When he spoke, his voice was muffled. I'm so sorry. God, Elena, I'm so sorry. I knew they were difficult. I knew they said hurtful things, but I didn't see how bad it really was. Because you were raised in it. It was normal to you. Their cruelty was just how they are. I reached across the table, took his hands. Tom, I love you. I've always loved you. But I can't keep sacrificing my dignity for people who will never respect me. He looked up, his eyes red. The eviction notice. You really meant it? I did, but Tom. I pulled out my phone, showed him the texts I'd exchanged with Mr. Reynolds over the past few days. There's a plan. I'm not trying to make them homeless. I'm trying to teach them consequences. What kind of plan? Remember that apartment complex I bought last year? The one in Oak Park? He nodded. There's a 2-bedroom unit available. It's modest, but nice. Safe neighborhood, good schools nearby if they ever want to watch the kids again. I was thinking we could offer it to them at a significant discount if they're willing to accept it, if they're willing to acknowledge what they've done wrong. Tom's expression shifted from devastation to cautious hope. You'd do that? After everything they've said? I'm not a monster, Tom. I don't want them on the streets. I want them to understand that actions have consequences. I want them to feel what it's like to be destabilized, uncertain, dependent on someone else's generosity, the same way they've made me feel for 8 years. And then, if they learn from it, if they grow from it, we can discuss next steps. So this is what? Educational suffering? Sarah calls it empathy through experience. I showed him my text thread with Sarah, her therapist insights about how sometimes people don't understand pain until they feel it themselves. Tom was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then finally, I'm with you. Those 3 words, that's all I needed. Small victory, number 2. My husband's allegiance, finally and fully secured. Thank you, I whispered. He pulled me into a hug and we stood there in our kitchen, holding each other while our children watched movies in the other room. While the sun set on Thanksgiving Day, while everything we'd built began shifting into a new shape. My phone started ringing at 7 p.m. Margaret. I didn't answer. It rang again at 7:15. Harold. Declined. At 7:30, Lisa called 3 times in a row. I let them all go to voicemail. Tom watched me silence call after call. Should we at least hear what they have to say? They've had 8 years to say something kind. They can wait a few days. I set my phone on the kitchen counter, face down. Besides, I told them, all communication goes through Mr. Reynolds. But I couldn't resist checking the voicemails later, after the kids were in bed. I sat on our couch with Tom beside me, and we listened together on speaker. Margaret's first message was tearful. Elena, please, we need to talk. This is all a misunderstanding. You can't really mean this. Call me back, please. Harold's was angry. This is extortion, plain and simple. You've been holding this over our heads, waiting to strike. We'll fight this. We have lawyers too, you know. This isn't over. Lisa's was desperate. Elena, I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry for what I said about you marrying for status. I didn't mean it. I was just being bitchy. Please don't do this. Please. Where are we supposed to go? Mom's having a breakdown. Dad's threatening to have a heart attack. You're tearing this family apart. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was tearing the family apart. Not their years of cruelty, not their exclusion, not their constant degradation. Me, because I'd finally had enough. Tom listened to each message, his face growing grimmer. Lisa does sound really scared. Good, I said, then softened at his expression. Tom, fear is what makes people wake up. She's scared because for the first time in her life, there are consequences for her actions. My phone buzzed with a text, then another, then a flood of them. Margaret. Elena, darling, please reconsider. We're family. Family forgives each other. Harold. My lawyer says you can't do this. You can't just evict us from our home. Lisa. Tom, tell your wife to stop this insanity. Mom is hysterical. Do something. And then, most telling, Lisa sent a text to me directly. Mom won't admit it, but they have nowhere to go. Dad's credit is shot. They can't afford any deposit even if they could find a place. You're literally going to make them homeless for revenge. Is that who you want to be? I showed the text to Tom. Notice how it's suddenly about me being the bad guy? Not about 8 years of them being terrible. Not about what they said today. About me being cruel for having boundaries. He sighed. What are you going to do? Exactly what I said I would do. Enforce the eviction. Let them panic. Let them feel unstable and insecure. And then I pulled up the lease for my Oak Park property on my phone. After they've sat with this for a while, after they've had time to really understand what they've lost and why, we'll offer them an option. A good option, but only if they genuinely apologize, only if they acknowledge what they did wrong. You really think they'll apologize? My parents? I think they'll do whatever it takes to avoid being actually homeless. Whether those apologies will be genuine, I shrugged. We'll see. Tom pulled me close, kissing the top of my head. I should have stood up for you years ago. I'm sorry I didn't. You're standing up for me now. That's what matters. We sat together in the quiet of our living room, my phone continuing to buzz with increasingly frantic messages. Outside, the November wind rattled the windows. Inside, we were warm and safe, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe fully. Tom broke the silence. Do you regret it? Buying the house? No, I said immediately. I regret thinking that sacrifice would equal acceptance. I regret hoping they'd change, but I don't regret the action itself. Because now? I held up my phone, showing the flood of panicked messages. Now they finally understand who they've been dealing with all along. And who's that? I smiled. Someone who keeps receipts. By Friday morning, Black Friday. Appropriately enough, the digital warfare had escalated to spectacular levels. My phone showed 43 missed calls, 67 text messages, and 15 voicemails. I ignored them all except to forward Mr. Reynolds' contact information with a single message. All communication through my attorney. No exceptions. Margaret's texts evolved from tearful to manipulative. Elena, think of the children. Do you want Emma and Jack to grow up knowing their mother destroyed their grandparents' lives? I replied once. I want them to grow up knowing their mother had self-respect. Speak to my attorney. Harold's emails, yes, he'd started emailing, were hilariously ineffective legal threats written in all caps. You cannot legally evict us without cause, and we will sue for wrongful eviction. And my personal favorite, this is elder abuse. Mr. Elena Reynolds drafted a cease and desist that was professional, cold, and absolutely devastating. He sent me a copy for my records. It outlined in excruciating legal detail exactly why every one of Harold's threats was baseless, explained my ironclad ownership, and warned that further harassment would result in restraining orders. That shut Harold up for approximately 12 hours. But Lisa was the most interesting. She'd moved into guerrilla warfare mode, trying to rally support from anyone who'd listen. She posted on Facebook Saturday morning, "Sometimes family betrays you in the worst ways, praying for strength as we face an impossible situation caused by someone we welcomed into our family with open arms." I screenshotted it. Sarah laughed when I sent it to her. Welcomed with open arms. She literally called you a gold digger at your own wedding reception. I know, but watch what happens next. What happened next was beautiful. Margaret's Bridge Club friends started commenting, but not with the sympathy Lisa expected. "Oh, honey, is this about Thanksgiving? Karen was there and said there was quite a scene." "I thought your brother's wife bought that house years ago. That's what Margaret told us." "Didn't you move back home after your divorce? Maybe give your sister-in-law a break. She's been very generous." Lisa deleted the post within 3 hours, but the damage was done. The whispers had started. By Sunday, I was browsing the neighborhood Facebook group, anonymously from a fake account, and saw at least 5 threads speculating about drama at the Hartwell house. Small victory, the Mur-3. Their social circle was fracturing. Margaret's carefully maintained image of perfect family was crumbling like a sandcastle at high tide. Sunday afternoon, Tom convinced me to answer one of Lisa's calls. "Just to see where they're at," he said. "You don't have to promise anything." I put it on speaker. "Elena?" Lisa's voice was hoarse from crying. "Thank God, please, you have to listen." "You have 2 minutes, Lisa." "Mom is having a complete breakdown. She hasn't eaten since Thursday. Dad's been calling every real estate agent in Chicago, but nobody will rent to them. His credit score is like 500 something. And her voice cracked. "I have nowhere to go. My ex won't take me back. I can't afford my own place yet. Please, Elena, there has to be another way." "There is another way. Your parents apologize, genuinely, for specific things. And then we discuss options." "Apologize for what? For treating you badly? Fine, I'll make them apologize. Just please." "No." My voice was steel. "I don't want forced apologies. I don't want, 'we're sorry if we hurt your feelings.' I want them to sit with this, to understand what they did wrong, to feel what it's like to be completely destabilized and dependent on someone else's mercy. Exactly how they made me feel for 8 years. "You're cruel," Lisa spat. "I always knew you were cold, but this is consequences. Call Mr. Reynolds if you need anything else." I hung up. Tom looked at me with something like awe. "You're really not backing down." "Did you want me to?" "No," he said slowly. "I really don't. Actually, I'm kind of proud of you." That night, Sarah came over with wine. We sat in my kitchen while Tom watched the kids, and I showed her everything. The texts, the voicemails, the deleted Facebook post, the neighborhood gossip. "This is textbook narcissistic family systems," she said, swirling her wine. "They're cycling through all the manipulation tactics: guilt, threats, social pressure, playing the victim. The fact that you're holding firm is probably the first real boundary any of them have ever faced." "Is that your professional opinion?" "That's my professional opinion and my personal admiration." She raised her glass. "To boundaries, and to women who finally enforce them." We clinked glasses. Through the window, I could see the first snow of the season starting to fall, 30 days until eviction. The real education was just beginning. The summons came via Tom on Tuesday morning, week 2, post-Thanksgiving. "My mom wants to meet, face to face. Just you and her. She says she wants to explain." "No, Elena." I said everything goes through Mr. Reynolds. "Please." His eyes were pleading. "Just hear her out. One conversation, public place. I'll go with you if you want." I considered it. Sarah's voice in my head. "Sometimes you have to let them try. Let them show you who they really are." "Fine. Starbucks on Oak Street. This afternoon at 2. You're coming with me, and I'm recording everything." Margaret arrived 15 minutes early. I watched her through the coffee shop window. She looked smaller somehow, her usual polished appearance slightly disheveled. Her hair wasn't perfectly styled. Her designer coat looked rumpled. The cracks were showing. Harold was with her, which I hadn't expected. He looked worse. Unshaven, his usual bluster replaced by a grim determination. They sat at a corner table, both nursing coffee, both looking like they hadn't slept in days. Tom and I walked in together at exactly 2 p.m. I dressed carefully again, power suit, hair pulled back, minimal jewelry, business armor. Tom squeezed my hand as we approached their table. "Elena." Margaret stood up, reaching for me. I stepped back, keeping distance between us. "Thank you for coming. Thank you for agreeing to talk." You have 30 minutes, I said, sitting down across from them. Tom beside me. Talk. Margaret's eyes were red-rimmed, bloodshot. I don't know where to start. Start with an apology, I suggested. A real one. Harold shifted uncomfortably. Now look here. Harold, no. Margaret put her hand on his arm, stopping him. It was the first time I'd ever seen her override him. Elena's right. We owe her an apology. She took a shaky breath. I'm sorry for what I said on Thanksgiving, that you're not real family, that you're temporary. It was cruel and it was wrong. Why did you say it? I kept my voice level, professional, like I was conducting a business negotiation. Because, she faltered, because I was angry about the tablecloth, because I've always been threatened by you. That surprised me. Threatened? You're everything I'm not. Independent, successful. You built your life from nothing. While her voice cracked. I've spent my whole life clinging to this idea of family legacy, of tradition, because it's all I had. I married Harold for his family name. I've lived in that house because it was the only thing that made me feel important. And you came from immigrants, from poverty. And you made something of yourself, without anyone's help, without a legacy. You did it alone. It was the most honest thing she'd ever said to me. I almost believed her. And the 8 years of cruelty, the exclusions, the constant digs about me being a gold digger. Harold finally spoke, his voice gruff. We thought you were after the family money. He laughed bitterly. Joke's on us, right? There was no family money. There hasn't been for decades. We've been faking it, keeping up appearances while drowning in debt. I know, I said quietly. I've known since 2018. That's why we resented you, Margaret continued. Every time you tried to help, every time you offered financial advice, it reminded us how badly we'd failed. Harold's investments, my spending, we destroyed our own security. And then you, young, competent, successful you, had to swoop in and save us. So you punished me for helping you? We punished you for making us feel small. She wiped her eyes. I know that's not fair. I know that's terrible, but it's the truth. I pulled out my phone, showed them the notes I'd kept over the years. June 2016. Margaret said my nursery choices were very modern, with clear disdain. September 2017. My parents' baptism invitations were lost. March 2019. Harold joked that Jack doesn't look like your side because of my diluted genetics. May 2020. During the pandemic, when I was delivering your groceries twice a week, Margaret told me I'd forgotten the coffee filters and should be more thoughtful. I scrolled through hundreds of entries. Margaret's face grew paler with each one. You kept track? She whispered. I keep track of everything. It's how I built my business. Documentation, evidence, truth. Elena, please, Harold said, and for the first time since I'd met him, he sounded genuinely humble. We were wrong. We were awful. But we don't know what to do now, where to go. We've called every landlord in our price range, and no one will rent to us with my credit. We can't afford a deposit on anything decent. Lisa's ex-husband won't help her. His voice broke. We're terrified. Good. That was the point. Fear opens people up to change. I'm not a monster, I said, but I'm also not a doormat. You treated me terribly for years. You made me feel like garbage in my own marriage. You taught my children that cruelty is acceptable if it comes from family. We know, Margaret sobbed. We know, and we're so sorry. I looked at Tom. He nodded slightly, his signal that he believed their remorse was real, or at least real enough. Mr. Reynolds will contact you with a proposal, I said, standing up. Whether you deserve it or not, I'm not cruel enough to leave you homeless. But there will be conditions, strict ones. Anything, Harold said. Elena, anything. We'll see about that. Tom and I left them sitting there, surrounded by the afternoon coffee shop crowd, looking lost and broken and finally humbled. The proposal Mr. Reynolds sent was elegant in its simplicity. Option 1. Vacate by January 1st with no further assistance. They'd be on their own completely. Option 2. Accept a lease on my Oak Park 2-bedroom apartment at a reduced rate, $1,200 month instead of market rate $2,000 month, for an initial 6-month term. The lease would require monthly therapy sessions for Margaret and Harold, couples counseling, alcoholics, anonymous attendance for Harold. I'd seen the bourbon consumption, put the pieces together. Lisa would need to find separate housing and employment within 3 months. No contact with me or the children except through supervised visits, pending demonstrated changed behavior. Written apologies to my parents for years of disrespect. If they missed rent, violated terms, or reverted to old behaviors, immediate eviction with no second chances. Harold called it draconian. Margaret called Tom crying, saying it was humiliating to have to prove ourselves like criminals. Lisa posted on Facebook again, another quickly deleted rant about controlling people who weaponize generosity. But by day 3 of week 3, as the reality of homelessness loomed closer, the phone calls changed tone. Harold called Tom directly. The therapy is fine. The AA is probably overdue. But your wife wants us to apologize to her parents? To immigrants who don't even speak good English? Tom's response made me proud. Dad, her parents are immigrants who learned 4 languages and built a life from nothing. You'll apologize to them or you can sleep in your car. Your choice. Harold chose apologizing. On December 10th, we arranged a meeting. My parents, Maria and Victor, came to our house. Margaret and Harold drove over, looking diminished and uncomfortable. I watched from the kitchen while they sat in my living room, the immigrants and the old money family, face to face. Mr. and Mrs. Torres, Margaret began, her voice shaking. We owe you an apology. For years, we treated your daughter poorly. We disrespected her culture, her background, and by extension, we disrespected you. We're ashamed of our behavior. My mother, in her accented English, said simply, "You hurt my daughter. For 8 years, you make her cry many times. Why?" The question hung in the air. Why? Such a simple question with such complicated answers. Harold cleared his throat. Pride. Foolishness. We built our self-worth on things that don't matter. Pedigree, tradition, appearances. We saw Elena's success and felt inadequate, so we made her feel small to make ourselves feel big. My father, who rarely spoke in these situations, added, "Small people make others small. Big people lift up. You choose to be small. Now you pay price." It was perhaps the most devastating assessment I'd ever heard. Delivered in broken English with more dignity than Margaret and Harold had shown in decades. "We know," Margaret whispered. "We know, and we're sorry." My mother looked at me, standing in the kitchen doorway. She raised an eyebrow. "Your call." I nodded slightly. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was a step. Meanwhile, Lisa was having her own reckoning. On December 12th, she called me directly. Not Tom, me. "Can we talk, just the 2 of us?" We met at a different coffee shop, neutral territory again. Lisa looked rough, no makeup, hair in a messy ponytail, yoga pants instead of her usual designer outfits. "I've been thinking a lot," she started, "about what you said, about consequences, about how I've treated you. And you were right. I was jealous. You have a successful business you built yourself. You have a good marriage. Even now, Tom's standing by you. You have beautiful kids. Meanwhile, my marriage failed because I was an asshole who thought I was entitled to everything. I've never held a real job. I'm 38 years old and I've been living off other people my entire life." "Is this an apology or a therapy session?" She laughed, but it was bitter. "Both? Elena, I'm sorry. Not just sorry because you're kicking us out. Sorry because I see now what I couldn't see before. You've been the strongest person in this family the whole time, and we treated you like you were beneath us. The irony is almost funny. Almost. What are you going to do after you move out of the Oak Park place?" "I got a job." She said it like an announcement of a terminal diagnosis. Receptionist at a dental office. It's not glamorous. It pays $35,000 a year, but it's mine. I earned it. I start January 15th. That's good, Lisa. Really. I found Tiffany and Bentley new homes with families who can actually take care of them properly. I can't afford 2 dogs right now. And honestly, she looked down at her coffee. I think I got them to fill the emptiness, having something that needed me that couldn't leave me. But that's not fair to them. It was the most self-aware I'd ever heard her. The apartment offer stands, I said, for your parents, but you're right that you need your own place. You need to build your own life. I know, and I will. She met my eyes. Thank you for being harsh enough to make me wake up. I don't think anyone's ever held me accountable for anything before. As December wore on, I made inspection visits to the Victorian house. They were packing, slowly and painfully, sorting through decades of accumulation. On December 18th, I found Margaret in the kitchen, my kitchen, crying over a box of old photos. This was Tom's first birthday, she said, showing me a picture of a chubby toddler with cake on his face. In this house. His whole life happened in this house. Houses are just buildings, Margaret. Families are people. You still have your family. You just don't have the building. Is that supposed to make me feel better? No. It's supposed to make you think about what you prioritized. You chose the house over treating your daughter-in-law with kindness. You chose appearances over relationships. Now you get to live with those choices. She nodded slowly. You're right. You've been right all along. 3 days before Christmas, they signed the lease for Oak Park. The first month's rent was paid. The therapy sessions were scheduled. Harold had attended his first AA meeting. The transformation had begun. We almost didn't do Christmas together. Tom and I debated for days. Was it too soon? Would it send the wrong message? But Emma and Jack wanted to see their grandparents, and ultimately, this was about teaching my children that boundaries could coexist with compassion. So we invited them to our house for Christmas Eve dinner, a small gathering. Tom and I, Emma and Jack, Margaret and Harold, and my parents, Maria and Victor. Lisa was spending Christmas with her new roommate's family. She'd found a small studio apartment she could barely afford and was determined to make it on her own. Margaret and Harold arrived with humble gifts, modest toys for the kids, a nice bottle of wine for us and for my parents, a beautiful arrangement of traditional Romanian cozonac bread they'd special ordered from a European bakery. We asked the baker what would be most appropriate, Margaret explained to my mother. She said this is traditional for Christmas. We hope it's right. My mother's eyes filled with tears. It was such a small gesture, but it was the first time in 8 years that Margaret had acknowledged my culture as something valuable, something worth honoring. Is perfect, my mother said, embracing Margaret. Thank you. Dinner was simple. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, nothing fancy. We sat around our dining table, cramped and casual, nothing like the formal production at the Victorian house. Emma said grace this year, her small voice thanking God for family and love and Mommy's bravery. Margaret cried quietly during the prayer. Harold squeezed her hand. We ate slowly, making actual conversation. Harold asked about my business with genuine interest. You've built something really impressive, Elena. I should have asked about it years ago instead of dismissing it. You should have, I agreed. No sugarcoating, just truth. My therapist says I have issues with authority, he continued, especially when that authority is a woman, especially when that woman is younger and more successful than I am. It threatened my masculinity, apparently. Tom nearly choked on his wine. His father, admitting to therapy insights at Christmas dinner, the transformation was real. Margaret talked about her first couples counseling session. The therapist asked me when I stopped being my own person and started being just the woman in the big house. I didn't have a good answer. I think I was 19, when I married Harold for security instead of love. The honesty was shocking, uncomfortable, but necessary. After dinner, we opened gifts. The kids squealed over their new toys. My parents gave Margaret and Harold a framed photo of all of us, taken at Jack's first birthday, one of the few family events where everyone looked genuinely happy. "We want you to remember," my father said in his careful English, "that family is not house. Family is people who love each other, even when hard." Margaret clutched the photo to her chest and sobbed. These weren't manipulative tears. These were genuine grief tears, grieving the years wasted, the relationships damaged, the person she'd been. As the evening wound down and my parents left, the kids went to bed. Tom helped clean up in the kitchen. Margaret approached me. "Can we talk? Just for a minute?" We sat in the living room, the Christmas tree lights casting everything in soft, warm colors. "I want you to know," Margaret started, "that the apartment you're offering us, the reduced rent, the conditions, all of it, it's more than we deserve. You could have left us with nothing. You could have evicted us and never looked back. The fact that you didn't—" She shook her head. "You're a better person than I am." "I'm not interested in being better, Margaret. I'm interested in being fair, and in teaching my children that you can enforce boundaries without losing your humanity. Are we—" She hesitated. "Are we going to be okay? Eventually?" I thought about that, considered it honestly. "I don't know. That depends on you, on whether the changes you're making now stick, on whether you can truly see me as family, real family, or if this is just temporary compliance until you feel secure again. I want to do better. I really do." "Then do better. Not because you're afraid of me. Not because you need my apartment. Do better because it's the right thing to do. That's the only way this works." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "Thank you, Elena, for not giving up on us, even when we gave you every reason to." Harold appeared in the doorway. "Ready to go, Margaret?" They left together, driving to their new apartment in Oak Park, the modest two-bedroom that was clean and safe and probably half the size of the Victorian house. A house they would never get back, because I was selling it. The listing would go live in January, and the proceeds would fund my children's college funds and my parents' retirement, with plenty left over for my business expansion. After they left, Tom and I stood on the porch watching their taillights disappear down the street. "That went better than I expected," he said. "That was one dinner, Tom. One good dinner doesn't erase 8 years." "I know, but it's a start." He wrapped his arm around me. "You did something incredible, you know. You stood up for yourself without becoming cruel. You enforced consequences without being vindictive. That takes real strength." "I learned from the best," I said, thinking of my parents. "They taught me that dignity is something you defend, not something you beg for." We went back inside our warm house, locked the door, turned off the tree lights. In the morning, Emma and Jack would wake up excited about Santa. Life would continue. Family would continue, just in a new shape, a healthier shape, a shape where I finally belonged. The snow started falling at dusk on New Year's Eve, thick white flakes that transformed the world into something clean and new. I stood at the window of 428 Rosewood Avenue, my house, though not for much longer, and watched the accumulation on the front lawn. Behind me, the Victorian was nearly empty. Most of the furniture was gone, packed into the moving truck that had come and gone over the past week. Only a few pieces remained for this final meeting. Tom came up behind me, wrapped his arms around my waist. "You ready for this?" "I've been ready for weeks." The doorbell rang. Tom went to answer it while I moved to the living room, where I'd arranged chairs around the coffee table, the same table where Margaret used to serve tea and judgment in equal measure. Now it was covered with documents, neat stacks of paper that represented 5 years of investment, sacrifice, and ultimately vindication. Margaret and Harold entered first, shaking snow from their coats. They looked different, smaller, more humble. Margaret's designer coat had been replaced with something from Macy's. Harold's usual bluster was absent, replaced by quiet wariness. They settled onto the reupholstered couch, $3,000 of my money, with the careful movements of people who knew they no longer belonged here. Lisa came next, stomping snow off her boots. She'd cut her hair short, practical instead of styled. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, working clothes for her receptionist job. She nodded at me, took a chair across from her parents. "Thank you for coming," I said, though we all knew this wasn't optional. This was the final accounting. From upstairs came the sounds of Emma and Jack playing. Tom had set them up with movies and snacks, insulated from what was about to happen down here. Mr. Reynolds would arrive soon with the final papers, but first I wanted them to understand exactly what they'd been living in, what I'd given them, what they'd almost destroyed. I spread the documents across the coffee table like tarot cards, revealing an inevitable future. Let's start with April 2018. I placed the first deed in front of them, the original purchase agreement. Purchase price, $400,000 to settle your mortgage and arrears. That's every dollar I'd saved from my first 7 property flips, my entire emergency fund, gone in one transaction to save your house. Margaret's hand trembled as she picked up the document, studying her own former address with my name as owner. Closing costs, LLC setup, legal fees, another $15,000. I added those receipts to the pile. Then we moved to maintenance and improvements. Document by document, I laid out 5 years of investment. The roof, $10,347. The HVAC, $15,000 even. New water heater, $4,000. Rewiring the chandelier, $3,800. Refinishing the hardwood floors, $8,000. The kitchen renovation, $40,212. Property taxes 5 years at $8,000 annually, $40,000 total. Insurance 5 years at $3,000 annually, $15,000. Utilities, gas, electric, water, averaged around $400 per month. Over 60 months, that's $24,000. I pulled out my laptop, opened the spreadsheet I'd maintained religiously. Miscellaneous repairs, plumber for various issues, $12,000 total. Electrician for outlets and safety updates, $6,000. Landscaping to maintain curb appeal, $8,000. Painting, interior and exterior, $10,000. New appliances beyond the kitchen reno, $7,000. Pest control, security system monitoring, HOA fees, all paid by me. The numbers climbed on the screen. Margaret made a small sound, somewhere between a gasp and a sob. Total investment over 5 years, $217,463. Add the original purchase of $415,000, and we arrive at a grand total of... I turned the laptop to face them. $632,463. 600? Harold's voice failed him. That's what you've lived on. That's what I gave you without asking for a single thank you, without expecting recognition, because I loved my husband and I wanted to help his family. Lisa's eyes were wet. Elena, we didn't know. You didn't want to know. You wanted to believe your own story, that you were successful, that you maintained this house through your own merit, that your old money meant something. I closed the laptop, but there was no old money. There was only my money. Immigrant money. The money you looked down on, the money that kept the roof over your heads while you called me a gold digger. The silence was heavy, broken only by the tick of the grandfather clock. Another piece I'd had repaired, $500 to preserve their precious family heirloom. The house appraised for $800,000, I continued. My renovations added significant value. A buyer is lined up, closing in 3 weeks. After agent fees and closing costs, I'll net approximately $750,000. Subtract my $632,000 investment, and my profit is $118,000. I pulled out another document. However, I'm not heartless. From that profit, I'm setting aside $50,000 as a startup fund for you. Enough for first and last month's rent somewhere permanent, enough to furnish a modest apartment, enough to begin rebuilding your lives. The remaining $68,000 will be split 3 ways: college funds for Emma and Jack, and a retirement supplement for my parents, who worked far harder than you ever did and deserve comfort in their old age. Margaret was openly crying now. Harold stared at his hands. Lisa looked at me with something that might have been admiration or might have been grief. Maybe both. "You've lived free for 5 years," I said softly but firmly. "Not because of family legacy, not because of tradition or old money or any of the fantasies you told yourselves. Because of me. Because I chose generosity when I could have chosen indifference, and in return, you gave me cruelty, exclusion, and on Thanksgiving Day, you told me I wasn't real family." "Elena," Margaret started. "Now," I continued, "you face reality. The reality that actions have consequences. The reality that dignity is earned, not inherited. The reality that family is built through respect, not bloodlines." The front door opened. Mr. Reynolds entered with his leather briefcase and a notary, snow dusting his shoulders. He nodded at me, the signal that it was time for the final transaction. "Let's make this official," I said. Mr. Reynolds spread the papers on the coffee table with practiced efficiency. Transfer agreements, lease terminations, liability releases, the machinery of legal closure. "These documents formally terminate your residency at this address," he explained in his measured attorney voice. "By signing, you acknowledge Elena Torres as the sole legal owner of the property and relinquish any claim to it. You also acknowledge receipt of the $50,000 settlement payment, which will be transferred to your account upon signing." Margaret's sob broke the professional atmosphere. "We'll be homeless. Where are we supposed to go? The Oak Park apartment lease ends in May. What happens after that? We don't—" "You have the $50,000, I said. "You have Harold's pension, small as it is. You have options. They're not the options you want, but they're more than many people have." Harold's face had gone red, but not with his usual bluster, with shame. "Elena, please, we're begging you. We made mistakes. We were terrible to you, but we're trying to change. The therapy, the AA meetings, the apologies. Doesn't that count for anything?" "It counts for the $50,000, I said. "It counts for the fact that I'm not leaving you with nothing. It counts for the fact that I could have evicted you in November with 30 days' notice and no financial assistance whatsoever. Instead, I gave you time, I gave you options, and I gave you one final chance to understand what you did wrong." Lisa leaned forward, her voice barely a whisper. "I understand now. Your pain, what we did to you. Every time we excluded you, every time we made you feel small, every time we reminded you that you weren't real family, you felt like this, unstable, unwanted, temporary." She wiped her eyes. "This is what we did to you for 8 years. "Yes," I confirmed, "except I did it to you for 8 weeks, and I gave you a safety net at the end." Mr. Reynolds clicked his pen. "If you're ready to proceed, we need signatures." Margaret picked up the pen with shaking hands. "What choice do we have?" "You always had choices, Margaret. You chose cruelty over kindness. You chose pride over relationships. You chose the idea of this house over the reality of family. Now you live with those choices." She signed. The pen scratched across the paper, each letter marking the end of an era. Harold signed next, his signature tight and angry but ultimately resigned. Lisa signed as a witness, her tears dropping onto the document, creating small wrinkles in the paper. The notary stamped everything with official finality. Signed, sealed, done. "The sale closes January 18th, Mr. Reynolds announced. "You have until January 15th to complete your move from the Oak Park apartment to your permanent residence. Miss Torres has been extraordinarily generous with timelines." After they left, Margaret sobbing into Harold's shoulder, Lisa walking alone to her car. Tom and I stood in the empty living room. Through the windows, the snow continued falling, covering everything in white forgiveness that the world didn't deserve. "It's really over," Tom said. "The legal part is over. The emotional part." I shrugged. "That's going to take longer." Within a week, the whispers had spread through their social circle. Margaret's bridge club friends dropped away, some from judgment, some from awkwardness, most because Margaret could no longer host in her impressive Victorian. Harold's golf buddies made excuses when he called. The people who'd been drawn to their image of success scattered when that image crumbled. The ungrateful parents who drove away their generous daughter-in-law narrative took hold in ways I never intended but couldn't entirely regret. Truth has a way of spreading, and the truth was that I'd saved them and they'd repaid me with cruelty, until I finally said enough. The house sold for $798,000, just under appraisal, but still substantial. I netted exactly what I'd calculated. The $50,000 went to Margaret and Harold's joint account on January 10th. They used it to secure a small 2-bedroom condo in a less prestigious suburb, a place with vinyl siding instead of Victorian charm, with neighbors who didn't know their history or their shame. Lisa moved into her studio apartment on January 12th with secondhand furniture and a new sense of purpose. She'd been promoted at the dental office. Apparently showing up on time and being pleasant to patients was more than enough to stand out. On January 15th, I watched from my car as the moving truck pulled away from the Oak Park apartment. Margaret and Harold loaded the last boxes into their sedan, drove away toward their condo, toward their smaller, humbler, more honest life. The transformation was complete. The reckoning was done. 6 months later, the changes were undeniable. Margaret and Harold attended couples therapy every Thursday at 4 p.m. I knew because Tom stayed in touch, navigating the careful balance between son and husband. Margaret told him things were difficult but necessary, unpacking decades of toxic patterns, learning to communicate without cruelty, understanding how their marriage had become a competition for superiority rather than a partnership of equals. The therapist asked me when I stopped being Margaret and became Mrs. Harold Hartwell, she told Tom over coffee one afternoon. I couldn't remember. Maybe I never was just Margaret. Maybe I went from being my father's daughter to being Harold's wife without ever figuring out who I was. Harold made it to 90 days sober in March. Tom and I attended his AA chip ceremony at his request, sitting in a church basement folding chairs while Harold stood at a podium and told his story to a room of strangers. He talked about hiding bourbon in the garage, about gambling losses he'd never admitted, about using alcohol to numb the shame of financial failure. My addiction was control, he said to the room, trying to control my image, my family's perception of me, everything around me because I couldn't control myself. And the person who paid the biggest price was my daughter-in-law, who I treated terribly because she represented everything I couldn't be: successful, honest, self-made. I owe her my sobriety, because hitting rock bottom was the only thing that woke me up. I cried during that speech. Not tears of vindication, tears of grief for all the wasted years, all the unnecessary pain. Lisa called me in April. I got promoted, assistant office manager. They're teaching me bookkeeping. It's not much, but it's mine. I earned it. Her voice carried pride I'd never heard before. And Elena? I've been in therapy too, working on why I need external validation so badly. Why I married for money instead of love. Why I treated you like competition instead of family. I'm proud of you, I told her, and meant it. Tom and I grew stronger through it all. We learned to communicate better, to face problems directly instead of avoiding them for the sake of peace. We learned that love isn't about keeping quiet. It's about being honest enough to fight for what matters. Our marriage counselor, yes, we went to counseling too, said we were rewriting our relationship contract, building something based on mutual respect and healthy boundaries instead of obligation and appeasement. Emma and Jack thrived without the constant undercurrent of tension at family gatherings. We had Sunday dinners now, sometimes with my parents, sometimes with Tom's parents, sometimes both families together. The meals were smaller, simpler, but genuine. When Margaret complimented my cooking, I knew she meant it. When Harold asked about my business, he listened to the answer. In July, I stood in the empty Victorian house, one final time before the new owners took possession. The rooms echoed with my footsteps. No furniture left, no family photos on the walls, nothing but space and memory. I walked through rooms I'd saved, touched walls I'd maintained, stood in a kitchen I'd renovated. The house was beautiful. It would make the new family happy, but it was just a house, just wood and plaster and glass. The family, my family, was elsewhere now, scattered but healing, broken but mending. I locked the door for the last time, left the keys on the kitchen counter, and walked away from 428 Rosewood Avenue. Justice isn't revenge, I realized. Justice is restoration. It's setting things right, even when right looks different than you imagined. So here's what I learned, and here's what I want you to understand if you're dealing with your own toxic family situation. Family isn't something you're born into. It's something you build. Blood doesn't make someone family. Shared DNA doesn't entitle anyone to treat you poorly. Real family is earned through respect, built through kindness, and maintained through reciprocal love. If the people who share your last name don't treat you with basic human dignity, you're allowed to walk away. You're allowed to enforce boundaries. You're allowed to say enough. Margaret and Harold thought they could treat me like garbage because I married into their family, as if marriage was a probationary period I could never complete, as if their acceptance was something I had to perpetually earn. But that's not how family works. That's how abusive power dynamics work. I don't regret buying that house in 2018. I don't regret the $200,000 I invested over 5 years. What I regret is thinking that financial generosity would translate to emotional acceptance. What I regret is the years I spent swallowing insults, hoping that if I just sacrificed enough, gave enough, stayed quiet enough, they'd finally see my worth. Your worth isn't determined by other people's recognition. Your dignity isn't given, it's defended. When Margaret called me not real family at that Thanksgiving dinner, she freed me. She said the quiet part out loud, removed the mask, showed me exactly who she was, and I finally gave myself permission to respond with equal honesty. The revenge, if you want to call it that, wasn't about making them suffer. It was about making them understand. It was about teaching a lesson that words alone could never convey. That actions have consequences, that cruelty has costs, that you can't build a family on exclusion and contempt. So if you've ever felt sidelined by in-laws, treated like an outsider in your own marriage, made to feel small by people who should lift you up, I see you. I understand. And I'm telling you, you don't have to accept it. Set boundaries. Enforce them. Walk away if you need to. And don't let anyone make you feel guilty for choosing your own dignity over someone else's comfort. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have revealed the truth at Thanksgiving, or would you have continued keeping the peace? Drop a comment below and let me know which city you're watching from. I'd love to hear your stories. If you agree that families should respect boundaries, that dignity matters, that sometimes you have to defend yourself even when it's uncomfortable, hit that like button. Let's build a community of people who understand that real strength isn't about enduring abuse. It's about standing up and saying, "Not anymore." My name is Elena Torres. I'm a real estate investor, a mother, a wife, and a woman who finally learned that being kind doesn't mean being quiet. Thank you for listening to my story. Whatever you're going through, whatever family drama is weighing on you, stay strong. Defend your dignity. Build your boundaries. You deserve to be treated with respect. Never forget that. And hey, don't forget to subscribe for more stories about standing up, fighting back, and reclaiming your power. Trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. Until next time, stay strong, set boundaries, and never let anyone make you feel like you're not enough. You are enough. You always were.